City.
A state of emergency declared in Charlotte as protest over a deadly police shooting turned violent for the second night in a row.
One person shot, now in critical condition.
Nearly 1,000 people taking to the streets overnight, pelting rocks at police, blocking roads and looting stores. 4 officers injured. The National Guard now moving in.
Good morning to you. I'm Heather Childers.
Good morning. I'm Abby Huntsman.
I want to get right out to Leland Vittert. He is live on the ground for us in Charlotte with the very latest at this hour. Good morning, Leland. What's happening now?
Well, good morning, Abby. Good morning, Heather. As you know, Heather, from living here in Charlotte, this is normally a peaceful, quiet, southern, charming town. And it was anything but that last night. And still on the streets now, dozens, if not hundreds, of heavily armed now North Carolina state troopers that they have brought in, not only in riot gear, but also with long rifles as well. I'll give you a sense of the battle lines here. This is actually the place called the epicenter. It's where all the stadiums are, where all the restaurants are, where all the hotels are. And there were pitched street battles going on up and down here. Just up there, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Outside of it, tear gas canisters. Now, a number of cars smashed. There's really 2 stories here. First was the protest that started around 6 or 7 o'clock tonight, mostly peaceful. Then about 8 o'clock is when the rioting began. By 8:30, there was a shooting with 1 person critically wounded, now on life support. And then it really began to just sort of fly with rockets, tear gas, bottles, fireworks, everything going back and forth between these police and what had really become rioters. There were a number of arrests. About 12:30 is when the police really decided to finally go hands-on, if you will, and stop the looting that had been occurring all over this city. The one thing, though, the protesters say is they're justified.
Whether I'm here, I'm in school, I'm in my car, you said, okay, a man got shot over here, right? So you basically saying, why would I put myself in dangerous way?
Exactly.
Right. Oh, but guess what? I could be at work, at school, in my car. I can still get shot by the police.
You get a sense of the emotion. It all was sparked by the death of this man, Keith Scott. He lives about 20 minutes from downtown Charlotte. He was killed by police. Now, the narrative from social media says he was killed while sitting in his car waiting for his son to get out of school while holding a book. The police, and there are pictures and witness accounts to back this up, say he had a gun with him. He got the gun out of the car and then approached officers, and that's when he was shot. There's a lot of people, though, saying, really, what is this about? Is this about no justice, no peace, these protests and then the riots, or is it about something else? Worth noting that outside the Hornets fan shop here, one of the many stores looted, there's some people who are asking, is this about no justice, no peace, or no justice, no free sneakers, Heather and Abby? And of course, there's a huge political component in this. Can't forget that North Carolina is a swing state. We're less than 50 days till the election, as the National Guard is expected on the streets here.
Right, that's a good point.
Yeah,
it is.
So troubling. And there were some other businesses, as you mentioned. The NASCAR Hall of Fame, I believe, was one where they looted that store. Also, the Westin Hotel, I understand.
There were a number of places that were looted. They tried to break into the Ritz-Carlton. They tried to break into the Omni, a Buffalo Wild Wings, where they tried to grab a lot of liquor bottles. There was a souvenir shop. They grabbed hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of cigarettes out of that. And you have to remember that, especially one thing for the Hornet store, these souvenir shops are much smaller stores. These are people's livelihoods. We saw the same thing happen in Baltimore, is these really looters, for no other idea than taking the 5-finger discount, completely ruin people's livelihoods.
Right. And this is their own town. That's what you always have to question. You know, they're vandalizing their own Walmart and their own stores, things that they rely on for their own lives. Leland Vittert live for us this morning in North Carolina. Leland, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leland. So troubling, and certainly not a representation of the town I grew up in. Here now to weigh in is former homicide detective Rod Wheeler. Rod, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Sure, good morning. Absolutely.
Let's just begin with your initial thoughts. I mean, you've been at the scene of some of these other riots that have occurred following police shootings across the country. Your take on what is transpiring in Charlotte?
Well, you know, what we see happening in Charlotte is almost indicative of what we saw happening in Ferguson, Missouri and Baltimore, Maryland. But what can the city do to quell the violence there in Charlotte? Real quickly, Heather, there are three things that they can do. Number one, don't stop communicating. Now, the police chief has been communicating ever since this incident began. That is a good thing. You have to communicate with the community. Number two, the investigation has to be transparent. It has to be wide open so people can see what's going on. And then number three, Heather, the investigation needs to be swift. It doesn't need to take 3 to 4 weeks to investigate a police shooting. If they can do those things and, again, keep communicating, then maybe that will begin to quell the protesters.
Yeah, that is a concern that this will end up turning into something like a Ferguson. So they've called in the National Guard now. Rod, at what point do they make that call to say this is big enough to call in the National Guard, and how helpful is that going to be once they get there?
Absolutely. Those are excellent questions. What is it that prompted the governor to decide to call in the National Guard? Well, we're moving closer towards the weekend. And anytime you have a situation like we see in Charlotte where it's continuing to explode, you got to have reinforcements for your law enforcement. So that's why they decided to call in the National Guard. The National Guard is going to really be placed on standby. We're not going to see them on the front lines like we see the Charlotte police officers. But if the situation does get out of control, then you're going to see more action on behalf of the National Guard. I think it's a good thing, though, Heather, that they are calling them in.
Let's talk a little bit more about the transparency issue that you brought up.
Right.
Just this past July, the governor there, Governor Pat McCrory, passed a law, I think it's HB 972, and it blocks the release of video from police body cameras, also audio as well. Is that a good idea right now? Should they have released that already?
No, they need to release that video because that's going to be critical. That's why the community is in an uproar. Look, there's been two different stories that has come out of Charlotte, as Leland just properly reported. You know, the one side of the story from the police is that the suspect had a weapon. The family is saying the suspect had a book. Well, listen, if there's video to substantiate either point, show us the video. You got to be transparent. And once that video is released, I do believe it's going to support the police officer, but then things should begin to quiet down at that point. So any investigation like this has to be very transparent. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to have all kind of narratives out there on social media, and then that's just going to keep the flames burning in Charlotte. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Rod, quickly before we let you go, if you are the police chief, what are you doing at this very moment? What are you thinking about?
You know, you're thinking about how you're going to move forward. You're thinking about how you're going to work with the community, because this will eventually quiet down, but you still got to be there in Charlotte. You got to work with the community. And like I said earlier, you have to continue to communicate.
Yeah, and we have, in the meantime, a civilian shot by another civilian who is now in the hospital in critical condition as a result of all this.
All right.
That's right. There were weapons out there. There were weapons out there last night. So it's going to be a challenge going forward, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, we appreciate your insight this morning, Rod. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely, guys.
Well, also breaking overnight, the Tulsa, Oklahoma police officer who shot and killed an unarmed black man is speaking out for the very first time. This, as we learned, police found a vial of the hallucinogenic PCP in Terrence Crutcher's car. Officer Betty Shelby's attorney says Crutcher refused to follow more than 24 commands, claiming she was forced to fire the fatal shot when Crutcher stuck his arm through an open car window. Well, his family says the windows were closed. Tulsa police are standing by that officer's story.
The recent police-involved shootings in both Tulsa and Charlotte sparking violent riots and anger all across the country. And this morning, the presidential candidates are speaking out and giving their take. Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins us now live from Washington, D.C. with more on that angle. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Heather. You're absolutely right. I mean, clearly this violence, these protests are happening in the heat of a very close presidential campaign. And Hillary Clinton has been struggling to generate enthusiasm among African-American voters. She's been sending out President Obama as well as First Lady Michelle Obama to deal with that issue, but also in the last couple of days has been calling in to African-American radio talk show hosts around the country to talk about these police-related shootings shootings and insisting that if she's elected, she will put into place reforms to deal with all of this. Not to be outdone, the Republican nominee Donald Trump has also been stepping up his outreach to African Americans, saying that Hillary Clinton has been talking about all of this for a long time but has not acted, and he is saying that he is going to deal with this outreach to the African American communities, not just for votes in November, but also to fix inner cities. Watch.
The inner cities are, I mean, can you say never, but certainly one of the worst stages ever in the history of the inner city. It's so unsafe where you walk down the street and you get shot or your child gets shot. So we're gonna really fix the inner cities. We're gonna spend a lot of time. The Democrats have run them for 100 years, mostly uninterrupted. I mean, nobody else. They're just uninterrupted. And you see what's happened.
Still, much we don't know about what happened in both incidents, but we do know that we have 2 more names to add to a list of African Americans killed by police officers in these encounters. It's unbearable, and it needs to become intolerable.
Now, members of the House and Senate here in Washington also jumping on these 2 police-related shootings. We're hearing overnight that members of the Congressional Black Caucus will be heading over to the Department of Justice here in Washington to march on that department and say that they're fed up with these police-related shootings. So this issue clearly not going away. Heather, Abby?
Yeah, that is clear. Ed Henry, thank you.
Want to say today as well. Thank you, Ed. Well, that does bring us to our look at who is talking this morning. And former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich is slamming Hillary Clinton, saying that she always takes the side of the people against the police without even knowing the full story.
Here's the great challenge for Secretary Clinton. When she was at Yale as a law student, she was a co-editor of an anti-police, left-wing alternative newspaper that described police as pigs. Her natural instinct is to take the side of the people who are against the police. Her first comments about this were anti-police. This is not a country which wants to see what we're seeing here tonight. Now, no matter what the excuse, this is not a country that wants to see looting. It's not a country that wants to see random violence. And again, you mentioned citizen upon a citizen. Well, watch and see how many people die in Chicago this week with no one noticing because they don't fit the current left-wing political mantra. But the fact is, the current system isn't working. It's not working in education. It's not working in jobs. It's not working in safety. And that's why Donald Trump, I think, may do surprisingly well in the inner city, because he's at least offering a chance to dramatically change things.
And let's keep talking about race and politics. Whose message on police and race relations is best? Email us, and we will read your responses a little bit later in the show. Log on to Fox and Friends First Facebook page right after the show as well for a live debate. Use the hashtag #KeepTalking.
Well, brand new Fox News polls are just in, showing Donald Trump taking the lead in several key battleground states. First in Nevada, where Trump has a 3-point lead now over Hillary Clinton, 43 to 40%. Trump has an even bigger lead in North Carolina with 45%. Clinton has 40 and Johnson at 6. And in the must-win state of Ohio, Trump tops Clinton 42 to 37%. That's a big one.
To another Fox News alert now. ISIS could be turning to chemical warfare to target our troops overseas. A rocket with possible traces of mustard gas hitting a base housing U.S. and Iraqi troops near Mosul. A Pentagon official saying that they found, quote, tar-like black oily substance on a shell that landed just feet away from the base. Initial test for mustard gas came back mixed, so it is being sent off for more testing. No one, thankfully, was injured.
Disturbing new evidence in the terror investigation in New York and New Jersey, including new chilling video of a bombing test run. Law enforcement now looking for these 2 potential key players in the case. Jackie Banyas joins us now with the breaking details. Jackie, what are you hearing this morning?
Good morning, Abby. Well, the 2 men discovered one of the bombs on West 27th Street in Chelsea moments before the first bomb went off a few blocks away. The FBI says they ended up stealing the bag. The pressure cooker was inside, and then leaving the device behind.
We've looked at the video quite a number of times, and it shows that they were out walking along the street. They saw the bag on the sidewalk. They admired the bag. They opened the bag. They removed what turned out to be a device, a pressure cooker.
Police want to question them as witnesses, not suspects. Also breaking overnight, new images of the bloody and bullet-riddled terror journal Ahmed Rahami had on him, that is, when he was shot. The journal making clear Rahami was not only planning for a shootout with police, but was also sympathetic to ISIS. It comes as new horrifying video emerges of Rahami's backyard in Elizabeth, New Jersey. You can see this here, scorch marks in the ground from an alleged test run. The FBI says they've obtained cell phone video showing Rahami setting off an explosive in his backyard, and you can hear laughing in the background. 2 days after the video was recorded, bombs went off in New Jersey and New York, injuring dozens of innocent people. Within the past few minutes, we've learned Rahami's wife is in Pakistan. She's heading back to the U.S. for questioning. Rahami remains in critical but stable condition this morning and is being held on a $5 million bond.
Some eerie video there. Jackie, thank you for that report.
You can tell people are on edge because yesterday there were at least 2 pressure cookers that were found. There was nothing inside, but at least one overpass was shut down, so people definitely concerned.
Yep, certainly.
The time now is 15 minutes after the top of the hour. As protests rage across the country, Hillary Clinton weighs in.
We do know that we have 2 more names to add to a list of African Americans killed by police officers in these encounters. It's unbearable.
Was she too quick to judge? Our next guest, a former police officer, says yes, and his message for her after the break.
North Carolina under a state of emergency as a peaceful vigil turns violent in Charlotte. Chaos erupting in the streets.
4 police officers injured as nearly 1,000 rioters take to the streets, throwing fireworks, looting the stores, and blocking traffic.
One protester shot in the head in the midst of all this chaos on life support this morning. Police say that bullet was fired by another civilian.
And this is the aftermath from some of that looting. Broken glass doors, merchandise thrown from the shelves and onto the floor.
And all of this chaos unfolding after police shot and killed a 43-year-old man that they say threatened them with a gun. His family says that he was unarmed and carrying a book.
Yeah. Another dangerous night in North Carolina. And for more, we want to bring in former Nashville police officer Vincent Hill, who's joining us now. I know this hits close to home for you, having served in North Carolina. First, your response. We've talked so much about the protesters and sort of the violence that's gone on overnight yet again. Take us inside the mind of the police officers. What are they feeling at this moment?
Well, they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. And here's why I say that. I mean, I've been out of policing for a few years, but I'm sure police officers that are very well trained know the difference between a gun and a book. So at what point does the black community want police to say, well, I better not shoot because I could be the next person in the media, but if I don't shoot, I could then lose my life. So essentially what people are asking police to do is give up their rights, not only as a police officer, but as a citizen of the United States, to protect your life against imminent bodily injury or death. It's ridiculous.
And it's really unreal when you look at some of the video that has been sent out on Twitter amongst some other social media networks, specifically of that individual who was shot last night by another civilian there at the scene. He's lying there on the ground in a pool of blood, and they're screaming for the police, the very people that they're, throwing items at and screaming and yelling at, to come over and save him. And they do. They do their job because that's what you do.
That's absolutely right. And it takes me back to Dallas. I mean, look at Dallas. What happened there? 5 officers lost their lives protecting the people that were there protesting against them. That's what police do, protect and serve. They run to danger.
Yeah, what seems so crazy about this, too, is we don't even have all the facts, right? I mean, you have the politics of this, and Hillary Clinton, who is not usually one to come out ahead of a story, came out very early on blaming the police officers for what happened. We have not seen this video. We don't know all the facts behind it. How dangerous is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here we are. We've been going through this for 8 years. I mean, I heard Hillary Clinton say we have to add 2 more names to the list. That just feeds into what we've seen for the last 8 years, that blacks are always the victims. No one wants to take into the account, oh, there was a gun. Oh, there was resisting arrest. Let me ask Hillary Clinton this. Can she name the 500-plus names in Chicago that have been killed this year, blacks by other blacks? Can she name the 11 that were killed last week? No, she can't. But ironically, she wants to name 2 more to this list. But yet we had bombings in New Jersey and New York. She's quick to scream racism, but not quick to scream Islamic terrorism.
Yeah, and someone who we have not heard from yet would be the President of the United States jumping ahead and calling for peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't fit his agenda. Here we have a gun, a black man shot by another black man. It doesn't fit his agenda. It doesn't fit Hillary's agenda to get her into office, saying she supports Black Lives Matter. And you know what's interesting about Black Lives Matter? If you think about it in theory, the only people who have proven time and time again Black lives don't matter are the black community. And why do I say that? 500-plus murders in the city of Chicago, where President Obama is from, committed by black men against black men.
Right.
Who really cares about black lives?
No, that's a good point. You know, you think about last night, it started early on in the evening, peaceful. You know, people out there doing what anyone should have the right to do, and then it turns violent. You have some folks that feel like when they get the green light, they can do whatever they want to do, loot the stores, hurt people. What do we do about it? Because there's a concern this can turn into another Ferguson. So how do we prevent that from happening?
Well, you have to show force and unity through your police, your National Guard. But then what is that going to lead to? More police presence, more people protesting the exact thing they hate. But they're causing it. I've said time and time again on my podcast, crime brings police, not color. That is proven. It's demographics. Crime brings police. Anytime you have people standing in the middle of the highway, jumping on vehicles, throwing rocks at police, you're going to bring more police. It's simple math.
Yeah, they were attacking reporters, photographers, also out there trying to cover the story. Let me ask you this one thing before we let you go. Would a trained police officer know the difference between a gun and a book?
Absolutely. Look, I've been out of policing 10-plus years. A, I still carry a gun. B, I don't forget my training. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I assure you, I know the difference between a book and a gun, and I assure you, any officer that's been on the street more than a day knows the difference.
All right, Vincent Hill, thank you for your service, and thank you for being with us so early this morning.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your
Always
insight.
a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, 25 minutes after the hour, and we are continuing to follow the breaking news out of Charlotte. A state of emergency declared there after a second night of violence.
We are back live on the ground at the scene. Up next.
It is Thursday, September 22nd. This is a Fox News alert. Breaking overnight, a state of emergency declared in Charlotte as protest over a deadly police shooting turned violent for a second night in a row.
One person shot, now in critical condition. The National Guard moving in.
Good morning. I'm Abby Huntsman.
And I'm Heather Childers. Thank you so much for joining us for this early edition. We want to get right out to Leland Vittert for you, though, who is live on the ground in Charlotte with the very latest breaking details. Leland?
Well, Heather, this is what they call the epicenter of Charlotte, because that's actually what this complex is named, with all the sports arenas, the restaurants, the clubs. It's also the epicenter of the rioting overnight here. You can see one of the many stores that was looted. This was a souvenir shop. It appears as though the rioters wanted some Red Bull and some cigarettes, and they do what rioters do, which is take the five-finger discount here. And while this is one picture that will go national about Charlotte, this is a city of major commerce, not only in terms of the southeast, but around the country, Bank of America, those kinds of things here. And just to give you an idea of where we're at in terms of being at the center of town, this is the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and outside of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, evidence of the pitched street battle that has gone on here for about 5 hours this evening between these rioters and the police. Here's one of the many tear gas canisters that was thrown. Some video from earlier. It started out as a peaceful protest and then was anything but. They certainly needed the cavalry, didn't have it. The cavalry is arriving now, the National Guard being called up under a state of emergency by the governor. And as we look at what happened overnight, you saw the police really hold back between 8 and about 10 o'clock. That's when that one person was shot by another protester, rioter, call them what you will. It wasn't until about 12:30, after much of the looting had occurred, that the police finally came in and made some of the arrests. The original spark to this, and it's fair to say that this has gone way beyond this now, is Keith Scott, a black man in his 40s who was shot and killed by police. Now, the social media narrative went something along the lines of he was sitting in his car holding a book, waiting for his son to get out of school, and was shot. The police narrative is very different, and they seem to think that they have not only the pictures, but also the witness accounts to back up that Mr. Scott had a gun.
What I can tell you is everything that we have, all the evidence supports the version that we heard from witnesses, from our officers, and from the evidence that we found on the scene. It's not my job really to dispute anybody's version.
And now the Charlotte police chief is going to have to figure out how to restore order to his town. We've had 2 nights of looting and rioting. Before, of course, Heather, you might remember, it was at a Walmart about 15 or 20 minutes out of town near where Mr. Scott lived. Now it is in a downtown area, and you can imagine the economic impacts and also the political impacts of these images that are going all around the country about Charlotte. Have to remember, Charlotte is in North Carolina, as you know, a swing state with less than 50 days till the election.
A town that you know well, Heather. You can hear the sirens behind you, Leland. What is the environment like at this moment, these early hours? You can see some of the tear gas you showed us on the ground. Have things pretty much totally calmed at this point?
Things have really calmed down. It was about 2 a.m. that the last protesters went away, and the police have stayed out. There's been an incredibly heavy police presence. About every 15 or 20 yards, you can see police or North Carolina state troopers there, either in riot gear or with high-powered rifles over their shoulders, those kinds of things. You get the sense that the police really were caught unprepared for the level of violence that occurred last night, and then they brought in overwhelming force to try and override that. You do get a sense, though, that this is a little bit of a town in shock. They just did not understand that things could happen the way they happened over the past couple of hours, and the amount of lawlessness that occurred. Just about 20 yards in front of me is where the Hornets, the Charlotte Hornets basketball team, plays, a big arena. There, one of the Hornets stores, the fan shop, also knocked over by folks who wanted free sneakers. And there's a lot of questions now about really what these protests are about. Is this about a protest about a man who was killed by police, or is this just about an excuse to riot, ladies?
Right. And the team there, of course, owned by Michael Jordan, who just donated a very large sum of money to Black Lives Matter as well. Leland Vittert, Live Force will check back in with you. Thank you so much. Well, the Fox News contributor David Webb joins us now to talk a little bit more about this. David, Leland mentioned some of the evidence that seems to support what the police are saying, although we have not seen the video yet. That is yet to be released. There are pictures that have been released of this gun that was found on the ground outside of the car involved, and also police saying that there was no book found.
Yeah, and this is what we're starting to see developing, and more reports come out about witnesses corroborating what the officers have said. And to be fair, we haven't seen it yet, but we have to also separate what's going on. We had where the original incident was, and now they've moved it into what's the uptown area of Charlotte, a more upscale commerce area, the area that Leland was talking about. So they're traveling there about 10, 15 minutes, which means the police have to take control of the paths of travel. You can't block call traffic, but you can't observe where people are coming from. And then we have to separate the protesters who may have doubts and questions from rioters. And when you have a rioter shooting another protester or someone else who's in there, another civilian, now the police have to have a concern of who's coming there armed. And that changes the dynamic. The police waited a little bit too long. They should have been in there in stronger force. They should have taken down this riot, because it was not a protest when you start blocking streets, when you start breaking into businesses. The police have to take control of the situation, and that's something they're going to have to get ahead of coming into the next night.
How do you win, though, David? Because then they're accused of, attacking these protesters and not allowing them to protest when it has, in fact, become a riot.
Well, the win is for the community. When someone's breaking the law, they're no longer a protester. And I don't know the exact state laws on rights to gather, whether it's permits or your right to do it freely. We've seen this. I've been to North Carolina for Moral Mondays, for these other groups. They've done their protests peacefully. They've marched for hours. They've done it. The police have to control it when it goes to lawlessness, damaging property, anything like that, even fighting and rioting amongst the protesters. That is no longer legal. They have to cut down. They have to take control of that immediately.
David, so we don't have all the facts yet, but what is the protocol, the proper protocol for police? If this man did in fact have a gun on him, what are police trained to do in that moment? Are they supposed to pull out a gun as well? What are they told to do?
Well, there's a term I would encourage everyone to look up and learn more about. And if you have a police officer friend, or you can a lot of times go to the police websites, department websites, and it's called use of force. If someone has just got bare hands, then you deal with them a lot differently than you have someone with a knife. But the minute someone pulls out a gun, you've escalated to the point where the police are not going to just pull out a taser and say, well, maybe we can tase him. That's not what they're taught to do. It's what gets police officers killed. And we, time and time again, we've seen cases where someone with a knife is even shot, or someone with a gun is shot, and because it doesn't hit any vital organs, they're able to kill the police officer. So the police are trained to use the force that is required and escalate to the level where they're able to control the situation.
Yeah, Heather, this comes at a time when police have got to be on edge. How many times now we've heard they've been called to a home to protect someone, and they open the door and they get shot. It's a new reality that they face.
Well, the reality the police face is a dangerous environment where someone who, say, may be on the edge of going over the line, as you're talking about opening a door, whatever the case may be, feels emboldened. Here's a sad part of this that we need to pay attention to. As a result of Black Lives Matter, and as a result of this anti-police sentiment that has led to the assassination of multiple police officers and multiple incidents of assaults on police officers, you now have an environment where people feel emboldened. There are people who believe the false narrative that police are shooting blacks randomly. When you look at reports of top 70 cities and analysis of the top 70 cities in America, you've got about 46+% of the people shot are white, and only about 26% are black. And you look at the propensity of crimes committed by each, call it ethnic part of the population, overwhelming, it's by blacks. So the issue is one of police, and it's not one of race. Where there are bad shoots, there's a way to take care of that. Rioting, destruction of property, I've seen this play. We've all seen this play. Ferguson, Baltimore, Milwaukee, and beyond. That is not a way to resolve the issue.
Yeah, and in this case, it was a black officer shooting a black suspect. And, social media also feeding that false narrative. So we have to do something about that as well.
All right, David Webb, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, also breaking overnight, the Tulsa, Oklahoma police officer who shot and killed an unarmed black man is speaking out for the very first time. This, as we learned, police found a vial of the hallucinogen PCP in Terrence Crutcher's car. Officer Betty Shelby's attorney says that Crutcher refused to follow more than 24 commands, saying that she was forced to fire the fatal shot when Crutcher stuck his arm through an open car window. Now, his family claims the windows were closed. Tulsa police are standing by the officer's story.
Well, the recent police-involved shootings in both Tulsa and Charlotte sparking violent riots and anger across the country. Now Donald Trump, he is calling for action, and Hillary Clinton takes sides. Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Ed, good morning.
Good morning, Abby. You're absolutely right. All of this, of course, happening in the context of a very heated presidential campaign. And one of the problems for Hillary Clinton, as Donald Trump has been closing on her in battlegrounds like North Carolina, is that she is simply not putting together the so-called Obama coalition, not generating enthusiasm among African-American voters in particular. So she has been sending the president out on the trail, First Lady Michelle Obama as well. And she is saying in radio interviews with African-American radio talk show hosts that she will put reforms in place to deal with these police-related shootings. Donald Trump being very aggressive, though, about saying that Hillary Clinton is all talk, has been in office as a senator for a long time, then Secretary of State, has not done a lot to deal with all of these difficult issues. And in a town hall with our own Sean Hannity that will be broadcast this evening, Trump made clear that he's tired of the Democrats suggesting he's a racist. Watch.
When you start to win and win and win, they have nothing to say and they can't stop you. They always start using the racist word. And it's a very interesting phenomenon, but the word racist comes out and that means that you're winning and that's their last chance. And I don't think it's working.
We've got to do better. And I know we can. And if I'm elected president, we will. I know I don't have all the answers. I don't know anyone who does. But this is certain. Too many people have lost their lives who shouldn't have.
Now, Hillary Clinton still has a large advantage over Donald Trump with African-American voters, but there was a poll just in the last week by the Los Angeles Times and the University of Southern California that suggested Donald Trump, for the first time, is making major gains with African-Americans as he steps up this outreach. Heather, Abby?
And we'll see what happens following the incidents in Charlotte as well.
All right, Ed, thanks so much for that report.
Great to see you.
All right, we want to keep talking about race and politics. Whose message on police and race relations is best? Email us and we'll read your responses later on in the show. Also log on to the Fox and Friends First Facebook page right after the show for a live debate using the hashtag #KeepTalking.
3 days until the first presidential debate, just 3, and Hillary Clinton has just revealed her biggest concern. She thinks that the moderators will, quote, lower the bar for Donald Trump.
Sometimes they are not, the questions she gets aren't difficult, but they are particularly aggressive, and I think that's meant to make up for questions that he can get that can be perceived as difficult for him to answer.
Clinton's communications director says that Clinton is going to get more pointed questions since she's released more policy specifics than Trump. The two will finally face off this Monday at Hofstra University.
We'll be watching. Now to a Fox News alert. ISIS could be turning to chemical warfare to target our troops. A rocket with possible traces of mustard hitting a base housing U.S. and Iraqi troops near Mosul. A Pentagon official says they found, quote, tar-like black oily substance on a shell that landed just feet from the base. Initial tests for mustard came back mixed, so it's being sent for more testing. Luckily, no one was hurt.
Disturbing new evidence in the terror investigation in New York and New Jersey, including chilling video of a bombing test run.
Law enforcement now looking for 2 potential key players in the case. Jackie Banyas joins us live now with some breaking details. Jack, what are you hearing this morning?
Good morning, Abby and Heather. Well, the 2 men discovered one of the bombs on West 27th Street in Chelsea moments before the first bomb went off a few blocks away. The FBI says they ended up stealing the bag. The pressure cooker was inside and then leaving the device behind and taking the bag. Police want to question them as witnesses, not as suspects. Also breaking overnight, new images of the bloody and bullet-riddled terror journal Ahmed Rahami had on him when he was shot. The journal making clear Rahami was not only planning for a shootout with police, but was also sympathetic to ISIS.
Handwritten journal found on Rahami at the time of his arrest, talking about, among other things, jihad, pipe bombs, a pressure cooker bomb, as well as laudatory references to Anwar al-Awlaki and Osama bin Laden.
This comes as new horrifying video emerges of Rahami's backyard in Elizabeth, New Jersey. You can see scorched marks there on the ground from a reported test run. The FBI says they've obtained cell phone video showing Rahami setting off an explosive in his backyard. And you can hear laughing in the background, we're told. 2 days after the video was recorded, bombs went off in New Jersey and New York, injuring dozens of innocent people. That's surveillance video of that blast. Within the past few minutes, we've learned Rahami's wife in Pakistan is heading back to the U.S. for questioning. As for Rahami, he remains in critical but stable condition this morning and is being held on $5 million bond. Ladies, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie. All right, 15 minutes now to the top of the hour. And we continue to follow the breaking news out of Charlotte. Unrest in the Queen City as violent riots rage overnight.
The latest breaking details from Charlotte up next.
With children. I don't know what that was, but it came from the direction of the protesters. Now, those are
Violence and riots on the streets of Charlotte for a second night in a row. The governor of North Carolina declaring a state of emergency, calling in the National Guard, which I understand is arriving right now. Protesters hurling tear gas and fireworks, looting stores, blocking off traffic overnight. 4 police officers injured, none though with life-threatening injuries. But there was one protester who is on life support at this hour. Police say that protester was shot in the head by another civilian. All of this unfolding after police shot and killed a 43-year-old man that they claim threatened them with a gun. His family, though, says that he was unarmed and that he was carrying a book.
Entering now to the campaign trail, just 47 days until the election, and brand new Fox News polls show more good news for Donald Trump in the key battleground states of Nevada, North Carolina, and Ohio. For a sense of how all of this affects the all-important Electoral College map, here is Fox News correspondent Shannon Bream.
Brand new Fox News polls showing Donald Trump now enjoying modest leads over Hillary Clinton in Nevada, North Carolina, and Ohio. Let's take a look for other changes all across the country as we review our Electoral College map, where 270 remains the magic number to win the White House. There have been some shifts, so let's talk about those first. Then we'll tally up the nationwide totals. Both New Hampshire up here and Colorado out west, they have shifted from leaning Democrat to toss-up, meaning they now could go either way. This week also brings a shift in Iowa, where Trump has actually been polling well. It goes from a toss-up to leaning Republican. And finally, a change in Minnesota. That moves from solidly Democrat to leaning Democrat. So where does that put us overall? Well, the solidly Democrat and leaning Democrat states are the ones in dark blue and in light blue. They total 260. That is down 13 votes from last week.